Thank you so much for coming. I'm Allie. I'm from the Millicent Library. We put this together with Elizabeth Tello in the green jacket back there of Discover Fairhaven. We've started to do more collaborations, bringing our programs to the beautiful spaces that we have here in town. So this is one of the first that we've done in Town Hall. We're also doing events at the Unitarian Universalist Auditorium. We have some more information on that when you are coming in. But I'm really excited to announce tonight's presenter, Kevin Logan, founder and curator of the Beer Can Museum. Kevin, do you want to come on up?
Thank you, Allie. Thank you to the Millicent Library and to Discover Fairhaven for arranging this wonderful event. Thanks to each and every one of you for being here. A big thanks to Travelers on Tour as well. It's kind of neat to have a happy hour at a Beer Can Museum presentation. And can we just mention what a gorgeous venue. Allie was telling me that Mark Twain was here at the initial opening of this building. So Mark Twain, Beer Can Museum, I feel like I'm in good company. I spent my career in book publishing, so having a literature connection is kind of neat. Without further ado, I invite you all to sit back and relax and silence your cell phones. I'm kidding. And what we're gonna do is enjoy what I like to call the evolution of an American icon, and the American icon is up on stage, the beer can. So I'd like to begin with a quick game of Name That Tune, and we'll give away our first prize of the evening. You don't need your tickets for this. I'm going to read a little song lyric to you, and raise your hand if you know the song as well. Hands are already going up. This is a so the lyric is, I blew out my flip-flop. I stepped on a pop-top. Cut my heel, had to cruise on back home. Anybody? Well, hands up, please. Hands up, please. We'll go over here. The song, Margaritaville by the late, great Jimmy Buffett. What goes better with a can of beer than a bag of pretzels? So what that song demonstrates is that the history of the beer can is not always particularly glamorous, but it is full of interesting characters and some pretty good stories, and I have a few for you this evening. And the story actually begins back in the year 1795, when Napoleon Bonaparte has a bit of a problem. Napoleon is busy fighting his Napoleonic Wars, but the soldiers out on the battlefield are not particularly happy with Napoleon because they're being forced to forage for their meals, which is fine if it's harvest season and you're near farmland. But if Napoleon is pushing his troops over the Alps in 2 feet of snow in winter, it doesn't turn out very well. So Napoleon's troops are oftentimes malnourished, they're starving, literally starving to death in some cases. So what Napoleon does is he takes some action and he says, I'm going to offer up a cash prize of 12,000 francs to the first person who can come up with a way to preserve food for long periods of time. Meanwhile, in Paris, France at this time, there's an executive chef by the name of Nicolas Appert. He's a pastry chef, he's a confectioner, he's dabbled in brewing a little bit. He knows his way around the kitchen. He's got a pretty good job. He works for a French count, a member of royalty, so he gets paid pretty well. But he's married with 4 kids, and when he finds out about the 12,000 franc prize, he says to himself, I think I can solve this problem. And talk about persistence. In his kitchen, for the next 13 years, he starts to experiment with glass vessels. And he takes these vessels and he starts to stuff them with food. He puts in fruits and vegetables and meats and seafood. He puts a cork on top. He seals the whole thing with sealing wax. He wraps the whole thing in canvas and he immerses it in boiling water. Well, lo and behold, Nicolas Appert is onto something. In the year 1809, he wins the 12,000 francs from Napoleon and the French government and becomes the father of modern canning. Now, we're not here to talk about glass vessels or champagne bottles. We're here to talk about beer cans. So we're going to go from 1809 to the year 1810. up in Great Britain, there's a guy by the name of Peter Durand. He's a British merchant, and he sort of copies the up here method, but he has more access to tin plate and metal. So he puts tinsmiths to work cutting out big sheets of metal, rolling them around cylinders, sealing them with solder, stuffing them with food, and he puts them in boiling water. Well, he presents his findings to the British government. King George III is pretty impressed, and before you know it, Peter Durand becomes the father of the tin can. So we're on our way to the beer can in 1810. Now, a lot happens in the 1800s. It's the last push of the Industrial Revolution. So I'm just going to hit a few of the milestones. One thing I can tell you, spoiler alert, you won't be able to get beer in cans for over 100 years. However, things do start to move along quickly. By the year 1822 in New York City, there's a cannery setting up shop and they're canning oysters successfully. By 1834 in Paris, they're now canning sardines. That's going pretty well. In the year 1856, a guy by the name of Gale Borden starts to can condensed milk. And this turns out to be a huge boon for the Union Army during the Civil War. Gale Borden sells his condensed milk to the Army of the North. And the good thing about milk is it contains protein, it contains calories, so the troops on the Civil War battlefield are very happy to get these cans of condensed milk. So there are historians to this day who say that, Borden's Eagle brand condensed milk, which you can still get at Stop and Shop today, helped win the Civil War for the North. So that was 1856. In 1858, nobody had yet invented a decent can opener, which sort of begs the question, what did people do for the first several decades of the tin can? Well, they struggled. They used chisels, they used rocks, whatever they can find in their sheds. They used bayonets in some cases on the battlefield to open these cans. Thankfully, thanks to Ezra Warner from Waterbury, Connecticut, he invented what's known as the bayonet and sickle design can opener. Some of us have probably seen these in our grandparents' kitchens growing up. You had a curved blade on one side, you had a long bayonet blade on the other. You would basically crank it around the top of the can and it very roughly took off the lid. Thank you, Ezra, we finally have a can opener. In the year 1869, a guy by the name of Joseph Campbell in Camden, New Jersey, starts to can soup, and we all know how that turned out. Campbell soup is a huge hit. In the year 1888 in New York City, there's a guy by the name of Max Ams, A-M-S. He's a German immigrant, and he's busy canning fruit and preserves with his son. But he and his son are working on a better can, and they come up with a method to fold over the lid of the can with the body of the can twice. He would have the metal fold over on itself to make a double-seamed can. This is going to keep out more bacteria, botulism. So his cans are known to this day as double-seamed cans or sanitary cans. This is important down the road, especially when we get into carbonated beverages. You know what I'm talking about. So that's 1888. In 1892, this wonderful building that we're all enjoying this presentation in was built. I feel like I'm in a church. I feel like I should be saying the next reading is from, what a gorgeous building. So that's 1892. You could not get a can of beer in 1892. So by the end of the 1800s, canneries are sprouting up all over the country. They're serving the different agricultural products and the farmland. You know, you had canneries in California that were dealing with tomatoes. Here in Fairhaven, eventually you'd get into cranberry canning, but that doesn't come along till about the 1920s. A guy by the name of James Dole out in Hawaii is getting ready to can pineapples. So the one thing you could not get in cans in 1899 was beer, unfortunately. So welcome to the 20th century. It's the year 1901, and high above New York's Grand Central Station in the Pershing Square building, which you can still see if you get off the trains at Grand Central, the American Can Company sets up shop for the first time. Now, the American Can Company will, for the next 90 years, will be the go-to people for any canning production, canning innovation in the United States. They have engineers working on improving canning methods. Now that's 1901. Now we're going to jump to 1909. In 1909, if you lived here in Fairhaven and you wanted to go on a beer run, it would go something like this. You would hop in your horse and carriage, unless you were very wealthy. You might have had a car, but you probably didn't. You hopped in your horse and carriage and you went down to your local grocer. You got a big, heavy crate of big, heavy, clear beer bottles, very much like this one. This is an actual 1909 bottle from Schlitz from New England. A couple things to note of this bottle. I have to pay a deposit on it. It's clear. Schlitz doesn't pioneer the use of brown bottles to protect the taste of beer until 1912. If I drop it, it's going to break, probably. It has limited space for marketing and advertising and artwork on it. And you know, light is going to affect the taste of beer. It gets a little skunky. Some of us know from certain beers with clear bottles, they can turn, or green bottles, they can turn skunky. But it's what they had. So you'd pay a deposit, you'd lug it home, then after you finished it, you had to return it to the grocer, who would return it to either the bottling company or the brewer, and they would have to clean and sanitize it up to 25 times. So that was your beer run in 1909. Now, in 1909, something significant happens. At American Can Company, a guy shows up from a brewer out in Montana, and he says, hey, we can get Campbell soup, we can get tobacco, Prince Albert in a can, we can get Chase and Sanborn coffee from Boston in a can. Why the heck can't we get beer in a can? It's a good question. So the engineers at American Can Company basically say, well, there's two main reasons. Beer is carbonated, so you need a stronger can. You need thicker steel, you need something that's going to prevent it from exploding because of the carbonation. Same goes for soda. Soda doesn't come along in cans till after beer. So you need 90 pounds per square inch of pressure. You need a can that can withstand that. A can of green beans, you only need 35 pounds per square inch of pressure. So that was one thing. The other thing is a very scientific term called metal turbidity, which basically means beer and metal don't get along very well. When beer would hit either the solder along the seam of the can or the tin-plated steel, it tasted sour, it tasted foul. So the big challenge for American Can Company is to find a lining to protect the taste of the beer from the metal inside. So in 1909, American Can Company tries, but ultimately they fail to produce a workable beer can. Now we're going to jump to the year 1919. If you look out on the horizon, you might see some very dark storm clouds coming in. Those are the storm clouds of Prohibition. The Women's Christian Temperance Union, the Anti-Saloon League are gaining political power, and before you know it, horror of horrors, America goes dry, and in 1920, national prohibition becomes a real thing. So the last thing on any engineer's minds at American Can Company is developing a beer can. Well, prohibition obviously takes a brutal toll on the brewing industry in America. Many breweries go out of business, they shutter their doors. Those that do survive have to get really creative, and they do so in many different ways. My favorite is in Jamaica Plain in Boston, the Hoffenreffer Brewery. They brew near beer, which you were allowed to do. It had to have 0.5% alcohol or less. But they also closed one of their bottling plants. They brought in great big piles of topsoil, and they started to grow mushrooms. And they sold mushrooms to the local farmers markets in Boston during Prohibition. So they got pretty creative. At Narragansett, over in Cranston, they focused on their ice business, which they were very good at. Out in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, the Pabst Brewing Company, they started to produce a cheese spread called Pabstette. It came in 3 flavors. You could get Swiss, you could get cheddar, you could get pimento, and it was a big hit. And eventually they sold that product to the Kraft Corporation in the 1940s. But who knew? Cheese helped Pabst survive Prohibition. Budweiser came up with some sodas. Narragansett produced some ginger ales and some root beers. Out at Coors in Golden, Colorado, they focused on their malted milk business, and they sold their malted milk products to both Hershey's and to Mars Candy Corporation. And now for our next prize, who can name, please raise your hand, the name of a brand of popular candy today that focuses on malted milk as the main ingredient? Congratulations. What's your name, young lady? Mary? You won some Whoppers. So thankfully there is a light at the end of the very dry Prohibition tunnel in the likes of a guy by the name of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is running on a platform that includes the repeal of Prohibition. He realizes that, hey, we need jobs, we need tax revenue from distilleries and breweries. Americans can use the jobs as truck drivers and as brewers, and Prohibition isn't really going too well. People are finding ways to get their booze. And so the engineers in American Can Company pick up on the fact that, you know, if he wins, Prohibition's going to be repealed. So we're going to go back to work on the beer can. Now, something very significant has changed. In the year 1925, there's a couple magazines that published their first issues in the United States. One is the New Yorker magazine. Another one is Cue the Hallelujah Chorus, Plastics magazine. Plastics and plastic products are now more available to the engineers at American Can Company. And thankfully for us tonight, one of the engineers at American Can Company sprays a very thin layer of PVC or vinyl into one of his test beer cans in his office. They do some testing, and lo and behold, vinyl is the magic ingredient that saves the taste of the beer. Prohibition is repealed, FDR wins, American Can Company finally has a beer can that works, but all they need is a guinea pig to try it out. They approached the big three brewers in the United States at that time. The top three were Schlitz, Anheuser-Busch, and Pabst. They said, hey, check out our newfangled beer can. Do you want to be the first brewer to put your beer in cans? They all said, that looks very nice, but we don't want to be the first, because if this experiment flops, we don't want our name associated with the beer can. American Can Company does not give up. They approach a middle-of-the-road struggling brewer in Newark, New Jersey called the Gottfried Kruger Brewing Company. Old Gottfried had passed away in 1926. The employees had pretty low morale. They had just gotten through striking. So the executives from American Can Company went in to the executives at Kruger and said, how would you like to be the first brewer to put your beer in this can? And they said, yeah, no, we can't afford that fancy canning equipment. They said, how about if we install the canning equipment? You don't have to pay a penny up front, and only if you're very successful will you have to pay us back. That's all Kruger needed to hear. They signed on the dotted line in November 1933, and they became the first ones to agree to put beer in cans. Now, American Can Company produces 2,000 prototype cans very quickly. They want to send these cans out to Kruger drinkers. They want to send them out to brewery employees, along with a survey to see what people think. I wish there was a way I could show you this first beer can. Oh, wait a minute, it's tattooed on my leg, so I don't know if you can see it. If you didn't see it, come up to me after. For a price, I'll show it to you. So they were very heavy steel cans. They weighed about 4 ounces, and they had flat tops, and the only way you could open them was with a church key opener. Some of us remember these from Hawaiian punch cans when we were kids. I wish there was a way I could show you the church key opener. Oh, wait a minute, my daughter just bought me another tattoo. I have the church key opener on my left leg. So the 2,000 cans go out, the surveys come back, and the results are overwhelmingly positive. 85% of the respondents say this beer tastes better than draft beer. 91% gave it a thumbs up. They said the taste of the beer is good. So on January 24th, 1935, a day known in the world of beer can collecting and on Hallmark e-card sites as National Beer Can Appreciation Day. The first cans of beer are sold in Richmond, Virginia. You can see examples of them in the shadow box on this table. There's a red Kruger Finest beer, and there's a green Kruger Cream Ale can. Those were essentially what the first cans of beer looked like, and they had to be sold. Each case of beer had one of the openers, the church key openers, because the beer drinking public were like, how do I get at my beer? How do I open this? So things were going very well for Kruger. They'd made a good decision. Within about 5 or 6 months, they had quintupled their sales. Well, the big three who had said no initially suddenly realized that their market share was being cut into. So they had to quickly hop on board the bandwagon. Pabst is the first to hop on board. I'm going to go grab some cans so you can see them. So as I said, Pabst was the first of the national brewers to hop on board. But they didn't want to put the Pabst Blue Ribbon flagship brand on the can. Again, it's early in the canning experiment. So what they do is they start to can what they call Pabst export beer, which I'm sure was just Pabst Blue Ribbon probably in the export can. What's notable about this can, in addition to how solidly it's built, is that the opening instructions had to be put on the side of every can because people didn't know what they were doing. So you would look, it said keg-lined can. That was American Can Company's trademark for the lining that we talked about. To open, number 1, place hand on can as shown. Number 2, hook opener under rim. Number 3, lift opener firmly all the way. So that was the Pabst Tap-A-Can. So Schlitz, they decide to start canning, but they do something a little different. They sign a contract with the Continental Can Company. The Continental Can Company had developed what they call a cap-sealed can, or a cone top, as they're known among collectors. The thing about the cap-sealed can is a brewer could use their existing bottling equipment, just modify them a little bit, and they could run these cone top cans through, and they just took a bottle cap or a crown on top. So this is one of the very first Schlitz cap-sealed or cone top cans. Schlitz got very creative in their marketing department. They came out with what they called Schlitz Sunshine Vitamin D beer. No need to go to the beach or take your vitamins, just have a beer and you'll get your vitamin D. Budweiser waited about a year. 1936, they started to can Budweiser. This is one of the very first Budweiser cans. It's called the Eagle Claw design. You see it's a gold can. They didn't switch over to their red, white, and black design that a lot of us are familiar with until about 1950. So that's one of the very first Budweiser cans. So within the first year of canning, there's about 83 brewers in America who are using this newfangled contraption, the beer can. 160 million cans are sold in the first year. Things are going really well for the beer can. And then everything comes to a screeching halt. 1942, World War II, all tin-plated steel production has to be put on hold unless it's for the troops. Some very smart brewers sign a contract with the U.S. government. They say, how about if we make camouflage cans for the troops? Absolutely. So for the next few years, there were 30 brewers who produced what are called olive drab, they're green camouflage beer cans. They're some of the most desirable cans in the beer can collecting world, and they often sell for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. I didn't bring one this evening, but there is a good photograph of the Budweiser can in the olive drab format, so you can check that out in the museum. So the war ends, 1946 comes along, the returning GIs have grown accustomed to this great new container. They really like beer in cans. So beer can sales continue to increase. They don't surpass bottles till about 1959, but it's beginning to build momentum. The next big milestone in beer can evolution comes in 1959 when a gentleman by the name of Bill Coors out in Golden, Colorado, he pioneers the use of aluminum in beer cans. One of the very first Coors cans is over there in the pop-up museum, so you can take a look at it. It's a 7-ounce can, still had to be opened with the church key opener. and Bill Coors is often viewed as this great environmentalist because aluminum is infinitely recyclable. The reality is Bill Coors was a good businessman, and he knew he could save a lot of money if he switched to a much lighter weight can. So aluminum has now started to make its way into the beer can world. Now we're going to go to 1962 to Dayton, Ohio. There's a guy by the name of Ermal Fraze, E-R-M-A-L Fraze. He's a president, he's an engineer, he's the president of a tool and manufacturing company in Dayton. He also designed prizes for the Cracker Jack boxes early in his career, which is kind of cool. But he went to a cookout with his buddies and they brought a case of beer. The problem was they forgot to bring a church key opener. So they're at this cookout and they had no way to get at their beer. So they're slamming the cans on the bumper of their car, as legend has it. Well, Ermal goes home and he says there has to be a better way. And being an engineer, he begins to sketch out what was to become the first pull-tab beer can. So he invented the pull-tab, which would eventually cut Jimmy Buffett's heel when he blew out his flip-flop. So I used to watch a TV show with my mom growing up on Saturday nights. It was called Emergency. Squad 51, there were some paramedics and they would get called out to different emergencies. Well, in episode 7 of season 2, they got called out to this house where this guy was guzzling beer. He'd pull the pull tab off, he'd shove it into the can, and he was guzzling the beer without thinking too clearly. He manages to swallow one of the pull tabs. He aspirates on the pull tab and he gets rushed off to Rampart General Hospital. Everything turned out okay, but this just goes to demonstrate not only were these pull tabs an environmental nightmare, but they could be a health problem as well if you ingested them. So thankfully, a guy by the name of Daniel Kudzik at Reynolds Aluminum Corporation in 1975, he invents the stay-on tab. The stay-on tab has been the industry standard for the last 50 years. If you bought a can of Cloud Candy here tonight, you probably used one. So that very quickly, in a nutshell, is the evolution of the beer can. And now I'm going to quickly tell you about the evolution of the beer can museum. This will be much quicker. When I was 14 years old, okay, maybe not that quick. No, when I was 14 years old, I went to a family reunion with my maternal grandmother. I called her Cotton Top. I loved Cotton Top. Cotton Top and I went from New England down to the very exotic location of Galveston, Texas, to go to a family reunion. I was 14. I met some second cousins who were already in college at places like Texas A&M University. And my cousin Patrick took me aside and he said, "Kev, check out this great new hobby." Now, I was always a collector at heart. I collected stamps with my dad. I collected baseball cards. I didn't have a smartphone, thankfully. I had a lot of hobbies. And so he brought me into their den, and he had his giant collection of 50 cans on the wall, and my eyes lit up. I have 2 older brothers who like beer. My dad likes beer. This would be a good hobby. Patrick says, "Well, Kev, I'll give you 6 cans. You can put them in your suitcase and start your collection." So I took the 6 cans, Texas Pride, Lone Star. I took them back to New England, and my collection started. I collected beer cans throughout my teen years, had about 1,000 cans, and then I went off to college, left all my cans at my parents' house. They eventually ended up in a garage in Ohio. I graduated college. I moved to the Boston area. I met my lovely wife, Vanna White, this evening. I bought a house, I had kids, and I had a basement, and I said, "I need a man cave." Called Mom up, "Hey, Mom, you still got those beer cans?" "Yes, get them out of here." So I traveled to Ohio. I ended up bringing the cans back to Ohio. So I set up my collection like a lot of collectors do. Along comes the internet, and so I set up a little website. And I, very tongue-in-cheek, almost as a joke, I call it the East Taunton Beer Can Museum. Well, in 2002, a writer for the Los Angeles Times publishes a front-page article on the Mount Horeb Mustard Museum in Wisconsin. 5,000 cans of mustard on the wall. Can you imagine? And in that article was an info box. And again, this was an article that appeared on page 1. And the info box included other food museums around the country. The Spam Museum, the Pez Museum, the Nut Museum. The Nut Museum was by right above my museum. I don't know if I should take offense to that. But then the East Taunton Beer Can Museum was suddenly on the front page of the Los Angeles Times. And I started to get inquiries from all over the country because it was a syndicated article. It ran in Austin, Texas, it ran in Chicago, and I began to get donations from all over the place. And I just went with it. I said, well, if they think I'm a real museum, I better become a real museum. And so I learned about museum curation, and I started to collect folk art. I started to collect advertising from through the years, in addition to the cans, of course. And it evolved into an actual museum. Within about a decade, I had documentary filmmakers from Australia coming in. I was taking part in charity auctions to raise money for the Jimmy Fund. We've given VIP tours to people who bid on VIP tours of the museum. So it's been a lot of fun. Then we had Chronicle come in, they did a piece. So that's how the museum, it started out as a very tongue-in-cheek kind of a joke, and it evolved into an actual museum. So it's an honor to share the pop-up museum with you guys tonight. I thank you all for being here. There's a couple little exhibits I want to show you that if you don't see them up close, you won't know they're here, but they're pretty cool. I'm going to start with, I'm going to grab the can so you can get. So I got an email probably 5 years ago from a guy out in the Seattle area. And he says, I know you have a beer can museum. I have something you might be interested in. I said, well, do tell. He said, well, I'm a collector of John Wayne memorabilia. And out in Newport Beach, California, there was a luxury resort for many years called the Newporter Inn. Now, the Newporter Inn was a hangout of the rich and famous. Celebrities went there. They had a helipad on the roof. You know, they would whisk in presidents, and John Wayne kept his yacht there, and he used to hang out in Newport Beach at the bar at the Newporter Inn. He became good friends with the bartender, and one day he brought in a can. He said it was a screen-used prop from a John Wayne film. Well, they glued it to the bar at the Newporter Inn, the John Wayne prop. Well, this collector got a hold of it in the early 90s when they renovated the whole resort. He bought it from someplace in Hollywood and added it to his collection. He's got the certificate of authenticity, the whole bit. He said, I'm getting older now. I want to give this can either to the John Wayne Museum, which is in Iowa, or to the East Taunton Beer Can Museum. So I had to make a pitch for it. I guess I made a pretty good pitch, because a few weeks later, on the front porch, arrived the John Wayne movie prop, which still has the glue on it from the bar at the Newporter Inn. So this is the John Wayne can. So that's pretty neat. Check that out. This one's kind of weird, but I love it. So out at Boeing Corporation in Seattle in the 1950s, they used to test out miniature versions of supersonic space jets. They would eventually evolve into the space shuttle. But in the 50s, they had different programs, and they built a couple of giant wind tunnels where they would test out these miniature jets. They would blast cold air into the wind tunnels at up to 2,000 miles per hour. Well, for some reason, in order to control the temperature in these wind tunnels, they reached out to American Can Company and said, hey, can you send us some unused cans? Well, they did. They sent them over 1 million unused cans in mint condition. There were soda cans, there were oil cans, there were soup cans, and thankfully there were beer cans. Well, years went by. People didn't really pay much attention or know what was in the bottom of these wind tunnels. Well, in the year 2016, they tore them down probably because of AI. They're now doing these tests in other ways. But when they tore them down, they looked way in the bottom of the wind tunnels, and they found all these mint condition beer cans. And they weren't just Budweiser cans. They were stunningly beautiful. I'm a little biased. I collect beer cans. But Rainier Jubilee beer cans. So these are cans that were actually in the wind tunnels, and the artwork is amazing. So if you get a chance, check them out afterwards. So those are the wind tunnel cans. A couple more. Bear with me. This is a fun story. This is one of the things that makes having a museum so much fun. I got a box in the mail along with a letter. It says, Dear Kevin, please find enclosed the Burgermeister music box that I told you about. It belonged to my grandmother, Pansy Spring, 1893 to 1983. She was born in Sussex, Wisconsin, and lived her entire life in Richmond, California, where my grandfather was the telegrapher for the Santa Fe Railroad. As a child, I remember she kept this music box on top of her refrigerator. I also remember she used to buy little half-size cans of Bergie, that's Burgermeister beer, because my mother would get after her for drinking the regular-size cans. I'm so happy I finally found a loving home for this item. Sincerely, John Graham, San Francisco, California. Now, the great thing about this, he sent a picture of him and his grandmother at a local saloon, which is hilarious. He's about 6 years old. And there's a picture of Pansy, and the music box still works as well as the day it was first sold for a whopping $3.50. It plays Oh Darling Clementine. So I'm just going to play a couple of bars. This is not for a prize. Can you hear it? So that's Pansy Springs music box. A couple more. So we did a movie prop. I also have a TV prop that's kind of neat. When they tore down the set of the TV show Married with Children, they opened the fridge that Al Bundy used to go into for his beer, and it was full of these, not Budweiser, but Bodmeister TV prop cans. These cans were full of Diet Pepsi. They're made, obviously, to look like a Budweiser can. But this was from the actual set of Married with Children. And my wife and I were watching an episode of Columbo not too long ago, and we saw them also at a frat party drinking Bodmeisters. So they weren't getting too drunk on the Diet Pepsis that they used to fill these with. So that's a TV prop. So during the pandemic lockdown, I'm on Instagram a lot. I'm a photographer, and I have the Beer Can Museum on Instagram, at Beer Can Museum. Check it out. But there's a makeup artist out in the Pacific Northwest who was getting very bored during lockdown, and she started to recreate some craft beer can art on her face with her makeup skills. And she would post one a week, and it took her 4 to 7 hours to recreate these beer cans on her face. So I've got a number of them in the museum. She sent me some signed glossy pictures of some of the artwork. This is a Bob Ross painting that she recreated on her face, but it was featured on a beer can. So that's Vivi Moss, kind of cool. The last question I want to ask you guys is, and I know some of you already approached me about this, so what beer can do you think I get asked about more than any other beer can in the museum over the years? Billy Beer. So there's a Billy Beer over on that table. It's kind of an amusing story. In 1977, the Fall City Brewery out of Louisville, Kentucky, approached then-President Jimmy Carter's brother, who was a little more vocal than Jimmy. He liked to be on camera, and Billy worked at a gas station in Plains, Georgia, and he helped with the peanut business, the Carter family peanut business. And he was good for sound bites, and he said things like, I'm red, white, and blue. I got a red neck, I wear white socks, and I drink Pabst Blue Ribbon at home. So he was a beer drinker. So the people at Fall City Brewery went to him and they said, hey, how would you like to put your name on one of our beers? He said, what's in it for me? They said, well, $50,000 a year is in it for you with licensing fees. He quickly signed on the dotted line. Before you knew it, there were 4 breweries in the U.S. that were cranking out millions and millions of cans of Billy Beer. They made the mistake of sending Billy Carter on a publicity tour. Billy really liked beer, and so he would have one too many Billy Beers, and he'd start to blurt out things on camera like, I drink Pabst at home. This is enough to make me quit drinking. And so Billy Beer eventually, very quickly flopped. About 8 million of the cans had to be returned unfilled. They said of the beer it should be put back in the horse that it came out of, because it was not a very good beer. So people, thought that it would be worth a lot of money as a collectible. It was more like some of the Beanie Babies. It's worth about 50 cents for a can of Billy. So there's one over there. So if you try to steal it, I've got more at home. So that is pretty much the Beer Can Museum. There's other exhibits. We have cans from over 80 countries. Not here tonight. We've got a few interesting ones over there, so check them out. We've got some artwork, upcycled art. Take a look at that. Feel free to ask any questions. We'll open it up to questions, and then we're going to do a grand prize drawing. Make sure you all have your tickets. And did anyone not get a ticket? You have a ticket? Everybody's good? Okay, so first we'll open it up to questions and answers, if anybody has any questions at all. Don't be shy. Carling Brewery, yeah, I did a presentation in Natick a couple months back. They used to produce Carling Black Label in Natick. So I brought a few Natick items that night to the presentation because I thought there might be people that were connected to that brewery. Have a lot of Carling cans. There's a Black Label can in this display over here. Yeah, I have a lot of them. Yeah. 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 I do. I'm glad you said that. I have a few. There's a little display right here with Boston area cans. There's a vintage Dawson can. There's a Narragansett. There's a few from Hoffenreffer in Boston. But the one on the left. Anyone else? Any more questions? Yeah, sure. So if you've ever had the beer Hetty Topper, it's a very well-respected beer. It comes out of Stowe, Vermont, and the artist who did the artwork on that can, which you see there, he sent me an original silk screen that he did. He's also a folk singer. He's a super nice guy. Went to art school in Rhode Island, and this is a work of art from the artist. It's a silk screen. Yeah. So, yeah, I love to connect with beer label artists. So, good question. Yeah. It's funny. I always get asked that, and my favorite beer does not come in cans. I like the Chimay Red, the Belgian Trappist monks brew. It only comes in cans. So yeah, it's being a beer can museum curator. It's always embarrassing to get asked that question. So thanks for that. Yeah. Yeah. Ichiban. I think I do have, you mentioned Kirin. What I want to say is there's a very tiny can over in the Japanese can area that came from a subway platform vending machine. And it's only about this big, like, yeah. And so yeah, I have a number of Japanese cans. They have a lot of really great commemorative cans from the 70s and 80s. Okay, Suntory, yeah. 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 Okay. Yes. John Green's Mental Floss, yeah. Yes, I actually run that video in the museum. Thank you for asking. Yes, I was featured on John Green's Mental Floss. It's very fun. That was my daughter, by the way. Any more questions? Feel free. Yeah. So the museum, it's in our residence. It's a private residence museum, which is why I do these road shows, so I can share a lot of it. You know, I do have dreams someday. If anybody has a barn that they don't want to use at the side of their house, it would be fun to have, a brick and mortar location, but, I'm semi-retired now, so I think about it. I don't know if my wife would sign the permission slip, though. She's nodding. So, yeah, so it's in a private location right now, but. Right now, so I actually cut back a lot during the pandemic. I went through the whole collection. I had a lot of situations where I had an aluminum with a steel, and I got rid of the aluminum. I was up to around 5,000. Now I'm probably more like 3,000 cans, but I like to focus more on the weird stuff, the art, the breweriana, the collectibles, the art, and that sort of thing. No, probably not. Any more questions? Yeah. The most expensive can I have, I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to be robbed tonight. No, I'm kidding. So if it was in mint condition, the Banner Ale can that you see, if it was in mint condition, it would be worth a good chunk of change. Star Banner Ale was brewed right off the Southeast Expressway in Boston. The building is still there. They sell electronic parts from it. You'd never know it was a brewery, but you can still see the building when you go into Boston. So that's one of my rarest cans. The John Wayne can in the early 90s went for a lot of money. I don't, I just enjoy having it as a story. I've never been in the hobby for the money because I can't afford it, but anyone else? Anybody else? If not, we're going to do the grand prize drawing. I know that's what you're all waiting for. And it's not a trip to Hawaii, unfortunately. Ladies and gentlemen, my lovely wife. Do you want to pick? You want to let Allie pick?
Allie.
Allie, you're going to pick it. And if you pick your own, you
Then
don't
we'll
get
know
to
it's
keep it.
rigged.
Yeah, just one number. Well, no, I'm sorry. Because the crowd is so big, we're going to do 3 consolation prizes and then the grand prize. Seriously.
This is the
So
first?
this will be the first, and it's not a bad consolation prize. Yeah.
Would you like to read it out?
The lucky number is 450-8912. All right.
Should we deliver it? I can do the running.
Oh, that's all right. First, I have to get access to it. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, this is an official, authentic beer can museum fridge magnet that says "as seen on Chronicle." You're welcome. Okay, next.
All right.
It's another magnet, just spoiler. The lucky number is 450-8785. All right. Woo. Nice. All right, one more before we get to the big prize. The number is 450-8915. 450-8915.
Second chance at the magnet. All right.
Okay, these people left, so someone else is getting this. We're not following them home to give them a magnet.
Try this one.
Okay, 450-8786. 450-8786. Apparently they share a refrigerator, so we're going to do another one. We may be here all night, folks. Okay. Here we go. 450-8914. 450-8914.
Wow.
Somebody else that
Really gonna
left.
make me draw again.
You didn't have to work tomorrow, do you? What did I be here for? 450-8778. Whoa! Hey! it's time for the grand prize.
I definitely need a drum roll on this one. Can I get that? And the winner is...
All right, the lucky winner is 450-8782. Hey, congratulations. Do you like to drink coffee? You have just won the official Beer Can Museum coffee mug.
Why would you have a glass when you can use a can?
Yeah,
Should I deliver this?
yeah, I mean, she
Oh,
might
yes,
want to.
yes.
I don't know if she
All
wants-
right.
Do you want the, you got it? Be careful with that. Those are rare. Those are as rare as a Banner ale can from Boston. Well, thanks again for coming. Thanks to Millicent Library and Discover Fairhaven. And have a beer and come on up. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's pretty neat.